leadership, to my way of thinking, requires thought, and focus groups just require research. I mean, they do the same thing.
But they don't work, Bill. They don't work. The focus groups, all the research, it's all crap. My TV show, when we first did the pilot...
You really need a plug at this point, Jerry. We all know you've got a TV.
All right, let's hear the history of his TV show. We're all so interested.
I would hardly call being on this show a plug, Bill. But anyway.
Thanks for staying up later. Bill Maher, the Comedy Channel's Politically Incorrect and various other appearances on various other outlets, is with us. For those who don't understand the premise of Politically Incorrect, which would only mean, I guess, they haven't seen it, because it isn't that hard a premise to understand once you've seen it. It's like a mad dinner party, right? You kind of toss the names up in a hat, you put 4 or 5 interesting people together,
it's like
sit around and talk.
A dinner party where I hope the people get mad.
Or as you said, the McLaughlin group on acid.
Somebody said that, yes, but I don't fight it, because you have to compare a show to something, or else people can't imagine it.
I've got several of the shows here, lists of people you put together. Jerry Seinfeld, Robin Quivers, who's Howard Stern's sidekick,
right.
Ed Rollins, the controversial political consultant. That was one grouping. What was the one you had? The Reverend Al Sharpton with Jim Bouton, the former Yankee pitcher.
Right.
What are some of your favorite pairings?
We had Dr. Dre with, I think, Gay Talese.
And did they find common ground?
And
the literary giant and the gangster rapper?
And also, I think there was a congresswoman on that show.
Susan Molinari was
right.
on the same show, yeah?
And recently on this season, we had Vladimir Posner and Joe Walsh together. And believe me, Joe Walsh was the one who had more trouble with English. But that is, I mean, that is the first joke of the show, is who you see sitting there, you know, and how they're paired. And it's people who you hopefully would never see together.
Ted, if someone told me I'd stand on the stage and clap for you, who was a member of the National Rifle Association, I would have called him a liar.
There's a lot of love in this room.
Part of the inspiration for this show was kind of your own frustration with talk shows. As a guest, as a stand-up comic,
right?
You know, once you finish the routine, you come and sit down, and I guess you were kind of frustrated with that aspect of it.
Well, I was, you know, I did a lot of Tonight shows, and I was always in trouble over there. I mean, I got chewed out a lot, you know.
By Johnny?
No, Johnny was the one who always saved my bacon. I'm quite sure, because I understand he was the boss over there.
I guess.
I have to think he was the last word, but no, some of the people, you know, under him would, you know, sometimes yell at me. Fred DeCordova, who I happen to like very much, you know, and we did wind up having a good relationship. But I started to do the show in, I guess, '82 or something. Reagan was in office. I used to do a lot of Reagan material. Fred directed
Bedtime for Bonzo.
There you go. And
Bonzo Goes to College, right?
And I don't see sequels. I like to leave the story where it is in my mind. But Fred considered himself a close personal friend of Ronald Reagan. And so I was in trouble. And I also used to do a lot of religious material. I'm half Catholic and half Jewish. And that was one of Johnny's favorite jokes, was one of the first ones I did. And he used to say to me, you know, do more of that kind of stuff. But then I would get yelled at by the other people. But yes, they would always say to me, you know, I would do something, and that's what they would say. You know, we're going to get letters. You know, and I think, well, you know, you have a whole staff here. You know, I mean, is it really the worst thing in the world? But I know what they meant. You know, I know. I worked in Memphis. This finally made it clear to me. I worked in Memphis. I'd never worked in the South before as a stand-up. I was never a big road guy. And I did jokes that I'd done on The Tonight Show, which, I mean, that's a pretty tame barometer, you know, religious jokes. Right. And there was, the next day, there was reporters. I mean, it was, because it's the Bible Belt. And I tried to explain to them, I said, you know, I've done these jokes on The Tonight Show. And, you know, maybe they're about Jesus, but, you know, they're not disrespectful. And what I finally got through to me was that it's not a good joke or a bad joke about Jesus. It's just the fact that they don't think Jesus belongs in a joke.
Well, give me an example of a joke you'd use.
Okay, Jesus in a bar. No. No, I'm just, that is, no. There's a Jesus joke I did on my HBO special, and I think on network TV. Jesus was a Jew, and if a Jew, why the Spanish name? You know, just a light remark. Memphis, no.
I seem to remember a joke you did about a guy who was half Jewish, half Catholic.
That's me.
Right. That's you.
That's me. I'm that guy.
You're that guy. So taken from real life.
Yeah.
All right, so you know the joke I'm talking about? The guy goes in the confessional?
Yes, that's what I was saying was one of Johnny used to always make me do that.
Do the one line. You know what I'm talking about when you went into confessional.
I tried this, yes. I was raised Catholic formally, as many people were, but I always had the Jewish mind. So, you know, when I went into confession, I would bring a lawyer in with me. You know, it was like, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I think you know Mr. Cohen.
That's a big, massive joke.
Well, I certainly got enough mileage out of it on this show.
You certainly have. Oh, why not?
Every time I'd sit down on the panel, he'd say, tell that joke. I didn't want to say, you know, Johnny, I've done it about 8 times. But, you know, he just loved it. Yeah.
So the guy bolts into the confessional at St. Patrick's Cathedral. He pulls the curtain. He says, Father, my name is Saul Herskowitz. I'm 73 years old. I've been with a 20-year-old girl. The priest says, Saul, wait a minute. You're Jewish. Why are you telling me this? He says, hey, Father, I'm telling everybody.
Cut it out, Bob. I've got a gut, too. Oh, God. That's funny stuff.
Back.
That is funny stuff.
Back after this, kids.
Half Jewish, half Catholic comedians have been here recently. It is, and it's a tough way to grow up. You know, all the things are tougher when you're like the holidays, for example. None of them are good for me.
Yeah.
The worst is Good Friday. I'm happy, I'm sad, it's good news, it's bad news. I don't know what to do.
Back now with Bill Maher. Long before Politically Incorrect on Comedy Central, you were on the stand-up circuit. You and Jerry Seinfeld are friends, and I know you saw a show where Jerry and I were talking about stand-up. And it was his contention, no such thing as a bad audience. You might think they're bad, you might rationalize that they're bad, but it's something in you, even with the same material that worked in Cleveland, if they're not laughing in Chicago, you're doing something wrong. What do you think?
Jerry and I have had that argument for 13 years now. It's like Carson and McMahon with the horse and the pig. You know, they used to have that argument.
Right. Carson thought a pig was intellectually superior to a horse.
Right.
It was an argument that riveted a nation.
Anyway, yes, Jerry has that Pollyanna view that there is no bad audiences. You know, I know he's a big star now, but I've seen him with a bad audience, okay? And there are bad audiences. I mean, you know, they don't know they're bad all the time, but they are. You know, sometimes you walk out there, and it's like, you know, it's like, you've been at the airport, you're on that people mover, that thing, you know, I love that thing. You know, you get on there, you got your bag, and all of a sudden, you're just walking. Everything is just so easy, and then you step off, and it's like, holy crow, I'm back. That's what a bad audience is like. It's like, you know, usually it's like that. You're on the people mover, they're laughing, But I think, a good audience gets the idea, a bad audience gets the joke. You know?
What do you do when you know that, at least from your standpoint, you're in front of a bad audience? What can you do?
Well, what I used to do is bomb. That was my method for about the first 7
And
or 8
then wallow
years.
in it?
Yeah, my first was to get mad at them. That's what Jerry's saying, you know. I don't think we're actually disagreeing that much. I think he's saying it's how you handle it, and he's right. I used to be terrible. I mean, I was the worst. I used to be hostile, and then you realize that they don't know they're bad. They don't have the point of comparison I have. You know, they haven't done these jokes before. You know, so they think they don't know that they're awful, but they are.
But since a lot of your stuff was on the edge and maybe challenging, I think you were in more jeopardy than the average guy, because if the audience wasn't ready to laugh and then you ticked them off on top of it, how the heck are you going to get them back?
Right. It took me many years to learn how to do that. Number one, stop ticking them off. That's a good way.
But you don't want to do that.
Well, I mean, there are areas I can go into that are less controversial than others. You're right. I do. I've always had that, my bane and my boon, my boon bane, is that I, say things which have an edge to them. And when it works, I think it's great, because it adds a dimension that you don't get from another type of comedy.
I mean, I'm for gun control, but if a guy breaks into your house and you shoot him, he can sue you. For what? Restraint of trade? I mean, is breaking and entering now considered working within the system? And God forbid you use the wrong word describing a criminal or, you know, a woman, ethnic. I mean, we're so sensitive, it's neurotic. I don't even call my dog a dog. He's a canine American.
What's the single worst reaction you ever got?
I was shot. And that was before the show. No, oh man, there were so many. I mean, I once went, the worst single night I can remember, I was in Cleveland. I was booked as a headliner. I'd been working about a year, and I was not ready, not close to ready to being a headliner. You have to have an hour of material. And this was a new club. This is when the clubs were expanding all over, and they in the suburbs of Cleveland. And I ticked the audience off about 5 minutes into the show. And, I mean, if the audience was great, I would have had trouble filling an hour. And here they are, and of course, your act shrinks now because you're not getting any laughs. Because all that time, because they don't like me, even my best material is going nowhere. So I did about 15 minutes and had to get off the stage. The guy wouldn't pay me, as well he shouldn't have. The people hated me and wanted their money back. And I heard them, you know, as I was arguing to get my money, I hear them yelling at this guy to get their money back. And then on top of it, the next day I got snowed in. And I had to, I mean, you want to like get Cleveland off your body, you know, it's like you want to shower. And I had to be in that city, in the airport, while I'm watching them try to get the runway clear for 12 hours in that airport, hoping no one from the show ever had to get a plane.
See, bombing then had to be 10 times worse than if the same thing happened now, because now you got a career. I mean, then you're saying, this isn't just a bad experience for tonight, but what does this say about tomorrow and next week and my prospects down the road, right?
Well, but it wouldn't happen.
It shakes your confidence.
Yeah, I mean, at that time it was just awful. But I mean, it wouldn't happen that way now because they have better runway clearance.
And also now a huge portion of the people who come to see you are familiar with you.
That's right. I mean, that's a lot of it. But it's also, you know, knowing how you're doing. I mean, just seasoning, you know. The show I'm doing now, I had a couple of other little cracks at talk shows. I was hired to do a talk show when I was 30. The David Brenner, you remember David Brenner on a talk show? I was originally hired to do that show. And the people who hired me actually said to me, they said, you are the guy, we're going for a fresh new look. We don't want, and they actually said the name David Brenner. They went, we don't want David Brenner. And then they hired him. But they did the right thing. I wasn't ready to do it. You have to be seasoned. You know, the biggest mistake that this comedy boom has is that it puts people on TV who have been doing it 2 years or less. You know, they move the camera right into the comedy club. And in the process, they destroyed the comedy club, because why should someone go out when they can see a newcomer? I don't want to see a guy who's been doing it 2 years on TV. I want to see a master craftsman. You know, when I grew up, Alan King was the young comedian, you know, on the Ed Sullivan Show. But he had been working in the Catskills. You worked there 15 years before you got on TV.
So, but how is, even though you see more unpolished comics, maybe more untalented comics, how in the long run is this really hurting the craft? I mean, it's like having a large farm system in baseball. You got more non-prospects, but it's given everybody a chance, and so some legitimate prospects have to come up, right?
First of all, Bob, everything is not like baseball.
It isn't? This is the point of my confusion.
But it dilutes. I mean, it's like inflation, you know. I think
so. It's like wild card teams in the playoffs, then.
Yeah, it is.
See,
it is.
Everything is like baseball if you just figure out the right analogy.
You're right.
There's too much dreck out there, is what you're saying.
There's too much dreck, is definitely what I'm saying. Yeah.
Do the old time comics make you laugh? You know,
some of them.
The kind of guy represented by Billy Crystal's Buddy Young Jr. and Mr. Saturday Night, the Friars Club guys. It
depends on who they are. I mean, a friend of mine and I have a list called Never Funny. Guys that we think were never funny.
Who's on the list? Never funny.
Well, that's going to get me in a lot of trouble. Danny Thomas.
Never funny.
No, I didn't think so.
And yet you did a spit take earlier tonight.
What, he invented the spit take? Danny Thomas invented spit and taking? I don't think so.
No, but if you say spit take, To the average comedy scholar,
Really?
what it suggests is this.
The king is dead.
What it suggests is, you can't come to see my show at the Copa tonight, Rusty, because you know that Uncle Tanous is coming from Toledo. Wrong. Uncle Tanous called and he said he's leaving with the maid. Right? That's the way it goes.
Boy, it is.
Was that worth the trip? That's the question.
It is time for you to go.
Oh, man.
But what were you?
But did he do it with orange juice?
What yellow substance were you drinking? By the way,
yeah, this is good, huh?
One little tip about the spit take. It's got to be somebody else
Look,
talking.
Here comes the stagehand.
Thank you. Somebody else has to talk like the spit take I did before. You have to anticipate what they're going to say. You try to do the talking and the spitting. You can't do a one-man show spit take. It's a partner thing.
What about this book you're working on?
Done. It's going to come out in the spring. It's called True Story, and it's a novelization. It's a novel, but it's what my life was like in that era we were talking about when I was snowed in Cleveland and that kind of stuff, when I started out in New York, and it tries to capture that feeling, because in those days, I mean, comedy was booming. I mean, it really was the rebirth of vaudeville. For decades, there was nothing in between vaudeville and when those clubs opened up in the 70s. You had to, like, I don't know where guys went to be bad, as they used to say.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I mean, you know what happened in the 80s. I mean, comedy just boomed, and this is sort of like the beginning of that spirit when that sort of started to happen. And it's just, I just put together all the, you know, there's so many great stories and anecdotes, and I just felt that nobody had ever really captured what this world is like. I mean, movies like Punchline, I'm sorry, it just wasn't good. It just didn't get it. Nobody's ever gotten it, and I tried. So we'll see.
Is it a desperate world? I mean, that's the stereotype. You go out there, you get laughs, but day to day, it's a desperate world and a world of insecurity and.
Yes, I would say, bottom line, all of show business is desperate because, as Harry Crystal once said, he said something like, "In this business, if you don't make it big, it's shit." Excuse me, but that's the quote. And that really is true. I mean, there's sort of at a certain point, there's no middle ground. When you first start out, yeah, it's exciting. It's just exciting to be in it. But at a certain point, unless you're really doing well, it's drudgery. I mean, this last year, I was 37. The year before, in '92, was 36. When I was 36, I felt a really old 36. And I felt a really young 37. And that's just because I was finally having a really good year.
Do you think, at some level, that you're funnier now that you've gotten more and more affirmation? Or did you always believe you were funny, and even if your career had failed in certain terms, you would have walked away believing you were funny?
I think I always was funny, but there's a hell of a lot more to it than being just funny. I mean, I'm telling you, on the circuit, there's a lot of guys who are really funny, and a lot of them have gone nowhere and never will. You know, I mean, why is anybody, I mean, Diana Ross, is she the best singer in the world? I mean, she's got a great voice, but why did Diana Ross, there must be 100 people who can sing as well as Diana Ross. Why is she where she is? Why is she a household name? Because there's something else that is more important than just the talent. You have to really want it.
There's that line that Billy Crystal's Buddy Young Jr. character has in Mr. Saturday Night. And at first, you don't know where he's going with it. He says, you know, I always just wanted to be the guy who walks into the Friars Club, and all the other comics look at him. And at first, you think he's going to say, they look at him and say, boy, he's great. No. He says, they look at him and they say, why him? Why that son of a bitch? I'm funnier than him.
Right.
That's what I want.
Right.
Not so much he didn't want their esteem or admiration or friendship. He wanted to almost annoy them. He wanted their resentment. He wanted to be the guy about whom they felt what he felt about so many other people that he was jealous of.
Absolutely. Everybody wants to be Frank Sinatra. You could hate Frank Sinatra to your marrow. You could hate his singing, his politics. If you're in show business, a certain part of you wants to be Frank. When you walk into the casino, no matter who else is with you, it's Frank and friends. If the plane goes down, it's Frank and others. That ego, I don't care what generation you're talking about, will never disappear from show business. you know.
Well, now, a guy like you can be in the club, but you're not the Frank Sinatra of comedy, if there is such a thing. And if you're somewhere in the top 10 or top 15, that's a hell of a career.
Right.
But does that always imply some, if you're number 8, does that always imply some insecurity, some problem with not being number 5 or number 3?
No, not for me anyway. I don't have to be Frank. I mean, I'd like to. But I don't have to be Frank. No, I don't think most people do. But you just want to be at that level where you can be with Frank. You know, if you're Dean, if you're Sammy.
You want to be Joey Bishop.
Even if you're Joey Bishop, even if you're Peter Lawford, even if you're the pimp, you know, you're in the club, you know. It's not that, you know, I'm sorry, sir, you're not on the list, you know. It's in the nightclub of life, we all want to be on the list.
So that does it, boys and girls. Bill Maher of Politically Incorrect on Comedy Central. I would hold up his book, but it hasn't been published yet.
Right.
It's coming when?
Probably in the spring.
True story, life on the road for a stand-up comic. And the comedy principle that we have identified tonight is you cannot do a spit take on your own joke. Someone else must be talking. Remember that. But all you comedy students out there, someone else has to be talking. Therefore, you're taken by surprise. You spit the liquid out, everybody laughs. But if you do it on your own joke, you look like a fool.
But despite that, can I say, because you are leaving, that you will be missed by a lot of people. You did this gig great.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. See you later.